Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about a new revelation that I have found inside Dungeons and Dragons, in my humble opinion. I want to share it with you, and I honestly, I want to talk this out with you. This is a, this is an exploration. This is a concept delving into Dungeons and Dragons that is in progress. I am delving right now. I'm pushing the glowing funguses aside and delving deeper into what is Dungeons and Dragons. All right, so I think what is Dungeons and Dragons is the greatest secular quest of my life. I never stop asking what this question, because I strongly believe what Gary Gygax did in 1974 when he created Dungeons and Dragons, it's fundamentally misunderstood at every single level, and that we are slowly revealing what he actually accomplished. I believe he was a polymath. I believe he was a regular man. I don't believe he had any supernatural powers. I don't believe he. I do believe he was very wise. I think he was very driven, and I think he was looking at the intellectual, emotional, um, and wisdom evolution of humanity when he looked at Dungeons and Dragons, and that he had absolutely no intention of creating a game. I think the reason he created, in my humble opinion, the reason Gary Gygax created Dungeons and Dragons as a game was he was 100% correctly understood that humanity needed to help itself. It needed a helper. It needed a champion, right? To help it progress to its next level of emotional, intellectual, and wisdom evolution. It's evolutionary states in emotion, intellect, and wisdom, right? But he was smart enough to know that that telling people what to do never works. Never, ever works. That's why self-help books suck, and nobody reads them, right? Like, and why people are ashamed to go into that section of Barnes and Noble, right? And why they don't want to, why they feel weird standing there, right? Whereas if you walk into the Dungeons and Dragons section, people are like, oh, look at that cool guy, right? He's going to get a game. So he disguised this next level of evolutionary help for humanity as Dungeons and Dragons. Now, the Isai Sadak, I want to say division, but I think that's wrong. It's a revelation, the Isai Sadak revelation. So let me explain what the Isai Sadak revelation is. So the Isai Sadak revelation is Isai, empaths, sages, and intellectuals, right? I think those are the people who are helped most by Dungeons and Dragons. Me, you, right? You are either an empath, a sage, or an intellectual. If you're on this channel, for sure. For sure. Like, who's here? Right? Only people who are the deepest cut into Dungeons and Dragons listen to my content, because it's Dungeons and Dragons meta. You're not going to find any information about how to make your ranger build better here. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about how do you use Dungeons and Dragons to make yourself better, right? Like, the only people here are empaths, sages, and intellectuals, right? And passerbys, so, people who just pass by, which is fine, right? Right? Welcome if you're just passing through. And that's okay, right? It's okay for you to come here and go like, hey man, this ain't my jam. I'm gonna keep going, right? That's fine. That's fine. That's what Dungeon Dudes is for. If you want the latest information on how to make your ranger build better, they got you covered, right? Like, go with God. All right, so Isais, empaths, sages, and intellectuals. Okay, and those align with the 6 attributes on the Dungeons and Dragons character sheet, and not the Dungeons and Dragons character sheet in 5th edition. The Dungeons and Dragons character sheet in D&D 1E, D&D 2E, D&D 3E, D&D 4E, D&D 5E, and D&D FE. What did you just say? D&D FE? Yes. Dungeons and Dragons Forever Edition. It arrives in May of 2024, maybe later, right? We are getting the 2024 core rule books. Hasbro doesn't have doesn't want to call it the Forever Edition but I will. They're right. There's one edition of Dungeons and Dragons, right? Only fools and harbingers of hate cling to the edition wars, in my humble opinion, right? And 2024 core rulebooks will not only be the forever edition for Dungeons & Dragons, we'll never get a new edition, and it will always simply be Dungeons & Dragons, but it will free every tabletop role-playing game from ever having to put out a new edition. You can republish your core rulebooks with new content without going to a new edition. And that's just like everything Dungeons & Dragons does, carrying the entire industry further, right? All right, so E-size, I define what that is. What are the SADACs, okay? The SADACs are the other people in American culture, in American society, in American hierarchy, social hierarchy, right? Are SADACs. Okay, now SADACs, what does that mean? SDC, strength, dexterity, constitution. Peoples whose lives are dominated not by charisma. And by the way, empaths, sages, and intellectuals. Empaths, charisma. Sages, wisdom. Intelligence, intellectuals. Okay? SADACs, S, strength. D, dexterity. And C, constitution. People whose constitution are higher than their intelligence. People whose dexterity is higher than their wisdom. People whose strength is higher than their charisma. Right? SADACs, SDC, and I'm putting in 2 A's there for flavor, right? Okay? SADACs and E-size. So, the reason why we're looking at the E-size SADAC revelation for Dungeons & Dragons is because I thought, and I think I was right about this, but I wasn't fully there, right? I thought that Gary built Dungeons & Dragons so that dungeon masters could improve themselves, dungeon performers could improve themselves. Dungeon performers are players who play player characters at Dungeons & Dragons tables. That dungeon performers could improve themselves. But what I didn't understand is that Gary built in a completely different level, saying, no, I'm not trying to improve, just improve dungeon masters and just improve dungeon performers. I'm trying to give you a path so that the entire society, American society, improves itself, right? And right now, I think there is an E-size SADAC division. We just saw it with the Great Pandee, right? So let me give you an example of a brutal, horrible, unfair E-size SADAC division, right? So all the empaths, all the intellectuals, and all the sages, where did they work during the Great Pandee? Hey, everybody, plague's ripping through America. We're going to work from home, right? And a buddy of mine works from home, and he explained that, and I had dinner with 2 of my friends, right? And I remember this conversation. And one of them runs a jackhammer in Philadelphia, right? Like, that's not the only place they work, but at the time they were running a jackhammer in Philadelphia, like breaking up parts of the street. And my buddy, who was definitely a sage, right? And he had a sage job, right? White collar office. He used to work in the office, and then as soon as the plague hit, he was like, "No, I'm just doing my job from home. Thank you, Zoom." And and he's like, "It's great, and I hope we never have to go back." And my buddy is like, "Hey, who was a SADAC? He had strength and constitution, right? And really wasn't an empath, intellectual, or sage, right? But is a very good guy." And he said, "Hey, that's not cool, man. Like, there's a lot of small businesses there. What about, where you used to get your sandwich when you were in the office, right? That food market you would go to, and there are 3 different small businesses now that have $0. And you're saying they can all, you don't care if they're, if they go out of business tomorrow, which most likely they will because of what you're doing, right?" And it was an E-size SADAC division, right? The E-size just sat at home, super safe from the plague, while the SADACs put themselves on the line every day to physically build our world, right? And the government, and the U.S. government, had no solution to this. They watched while it happened, and those small businesses very, very clearly did go out of business. Not all of them, but half, a third, easily. And not even the worst ones, like some of the best ones, right? And the government's like, who cares, right? But in 1974, Gary Gygax said, I care. I want this fixed, right? And built in the Isai Sadak revelation into the standard forever Dungeons and Dragons character sheet, right? And when you look at the Dungeons and Dragons character sheet, there's this. I want it. Help me, please help me. I love you guys, right? You're all smarter. Half of you are smarter than me. Division is the wrong word, right? There's something better, but there's this dividing line, right, between the Sadak, the strength, dexterity, and constitution, and the Chaz Wiz, the intelligence, charisma, wisdom, right? And this is a very distinct, very permanent section, right, that says we've got to acknowledge this division and we have to heal it, right? So that we don't do what we just did, literally let the Isais sit, right, safe, and make more money, right, while the Sadaks literally labor every day in the middle of plague, right, to keep our world together. It is brutally cruel. And Gary Gygax saw it in 1974 and carefully wove an amber thread of hope. I'm the first to see it. I'm the first to see that the Dungeons & Dragons character sheet is actually deep commentary, not commentary, a deep map to fix our divisions, right? Now, what is the solution? How do we fix it? I don't know what Gary put in there, but I will find it. I will find the next revelation in Dungeons & Dragons. I found the first one 5 years ago, like that Gary definitely built Dungeons & Dragons to be to make sure that people could improve, that Dungeons & Dragons was never about cutting goblins in half. It was always about cutting our deficiencies in half, right? In my humble opinion. So thank you very much for letting me explore this concept with you. Well, explore this revelation with you. I think it's more than a concept. It is a revelation. It is the second revelation given to us by Gary Gygax, right? In that we need to find that we have a deep and abiding division in American society. And Gary set out to first illuminate it for us, and then the revelation on how to fix it is sitting in Dungeons & Dragons. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more and absolutely nothing less. What's important is when I hear your humble opinion. When you get in the comments and send your traffic, please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.